Yep. Here we are on the Eden. Lovely little river, but unfortunately it's very cold and it rained last night, but the water's up. I don't think much of our chances today, really, unfortunately, but we'll give it a little go for an hour or so and just see what happens. Just fishing this rather nice pool and saw what I thought was a rise, and then two big otters came up, so it wasn't a rise at all, it was an otter's holt just down here. Interesting little corner here, took a bit of shelter, a little break, and I found these very old writings inscribed into the walls here, 1816, and George Thompson, Matherton. Let's see what else we got. We've got a small grayling, which is nice. You see the small grayling here. You see there's only a small one. It's now back in the water. It's going to swim away, look. Just there. Here we go. Help him away. And what a beautiful spot to be. This lovely deep pool. And at the back of the pool I've just noticed some grayling coming in, rising, so we'll try a fly over them, and if that doesn't work we'll move to a dry fly. Now we've got a lovely fish on here, this lovely pool, as you can see just down in front of me. We've got a nice fish, about £2, beautiful, you can see that. It's a lovely fish. I think it's a brown trout. It could be a grayling, but no, it's a nice big brown trout, about £2. Just coming up to the top now. Prepare for it. It's just about worn out. Get my net ready. There he comes. Lovely fish. Just got to get him over those rocks. There he comes now. So it doesn't come off at this stage. Giving a good fight of it. There we go. Now into the net. Got a very light line on. Certainly giving a good account of itself. Here we go into the net now. No, not quite. Yes. Oh, what a beautiful fish that is, look at that. Good £2, £2.5, maybe nearly £3 that fish. Beautiful, beautiful fish. Well, there we are. Lovely brown trout, the wild brownie from this river. And the fly it's caught on is a little gold head nymph here, look. Take a close up of that. His head and you'll see. Here we are with a lovely nice 2.5, maybe just about £3. Lovely fish. Nicest brown trout I've had for a long, long time. Really surprising event. Well, it's just at the tail end of that pool that we had the trout just now. And we're working our way down a few little waterfalls before we go back. And here we are back at that spot. But it was such bad weather before. Where those very early carvings are, dated 1816, in the stonework here, in the natural cliff. By the river. Let's have a look, go at this spot. It looks really nice. Just over by that tree over there. You don't get much nicer places to fish than this, do you? Well, you just never know. I'm into another nice fish here in between these branches. It's rather a long way away. That's going to be difficult to get at this time. Well, weather's looking a bit the worst now, but fish were rising for dry fly. I tried it, didn't get a touch. So I'm working my way back now. Well, we just tried a bit of dry fly, had a little Greenwald's Glory on there, because it's a beautiful spot, but nothing rising at the moment. It's nice to see little fish like this that are fine, new stock, small power. As you see, a very small fish, but it's good to see that these wild fish are breeding. And you see here the otter footprints as well, so I'm not the only fisherman around. Well, the weather's changing slightly, but we'll keep fishing an hour or so as it actually starts pouring with rain. Rain's coming on. This looks a good spot. Well, what beautiful pools to try, eh? Let's take a little walk under here and see what the fish see. It's a lovely pool here. I know there's some trout about, a few grayling. We'll just go underwater, half a way across. Take a look at some of the rapids now. See what it's like for the fishes looking under there, shall we? come out on the Eden down here and dropped in the fly. A second later, there we are, he's on the end. Nice brownie. Not as big as yesterday's, but still not bad. So let's get him in the net. Not easy filming and fishing at the same time, but good fun. He's about £1, I'd say. Nice fish. Just lying in the side here, and I just put the fly down for a moment just to get ready. And there he was. Here we are. Fine little Eden trout, and as we caught one yesterday, larger, and we kept that one, I think this one, we can let him go again. So let's put him back into the water, shall we? And we should see him some way then. We've got a nice fish on here now as well, got right round the bend there. That's what we can do with it. Try and get him back again. See if we can find him back. Took it right over the other side of the river there. We've got the net down. It's a good fish, so it doesn't want to come in too readily. Here he comes. Now let's see if we can get him up and onto the surface. Get the net under him. Time, come round again. He's off again, come here. That's it, come on, fish. I couldn't get him out. Let's try again. Right. That was because the net got caught in the hook. Just at the edge. Lovely fish, look. Well, another lovely Eden trout. About £1.5, nearly £2, caught in this stretch here, which is what we'd expect of a lovely piece like that. see we've now skinned the whole fish out, and I've got right into the back of the head, cleaned all of it out except for the gills. The eyes, the brain, everything else has been removed. It's only the flesh of the gills that's left, and a little bit of meat, but very little indeed. I shall deal with that later on, and borax and some formaldehyde, and we should be alright to work on that. So now I want to fold this up and freeze it. So we'll literally roll it onto itself. I'm just going to go and wash it off first, and then just roll it onto itself, put it into a plastic bag and freeze it up. Okay, well now we're back in the studio, and here's our fish body. I've got needle and fishing line ready, a little scalpel, some formaldehyde just to do little bits of the tips of the fins where I couldn't get stuff out, having to do it so roughly at the time, some sodium borate or borax powder. You can get this stuff, it's called washing soda. If you're in America and you want to know what it is, you can get it called 3 Mules washing soda from usually a hardware store there. In England we just get it from a chemist to order it in those big boxes. And of course I've got my fish skin ready here, which I'm now going to get out, which was frozen and should now have thawed out and be ready to be prepared. So I should now be able to get this out, and if it's thawed out, spread it out nice and wet to what I want it to be. Don't want the fins splitting. And the first thing I'm going to do is to coat the whole thing in the borax powder inside, which will preserve it and help dry it out as well. Don't want it too dry, as I say. But there, a bit of rough and ready skinning, but that's what was required. So plenty of the borax powder all over inside to help dry it out, and also into the eyes and into the head. Can't have enough of this stuff, it will help dry and preserve it. I'll say you can't have too much of it, you can always brush off the excess, so no worries there. Right, I'm going to put a little bit of formaldehyde just in the tail and a few of the little bits of flesh have been left. I have to adjust it slightly. She's lying quite nicely over the body former now. We should better stitch it all up and sort it out. I'm going to use a little bit of fiberglass wool just in the tail end and into the cavity of the body here, just to fill it out a bit to get the shaping right. That's the head tied in. A couple of knots on that. There's going to be a gap in the skin along here, there always is, unless you get the body absolutely perfect or slightly smaller. But we're going to use filler on that later anyway. So now I need to stitch all the way along here to finish it off. I've got about halfway. I'm going to tie that off in a moment and just move this up a little bit to get these stitches a bit more level. Now this time I'm quite deliberately working back towards the middle from the tail, because otherwise you're just liable to find that the whole thing will tension up on the sewing in between and you won't be able to get the body in. So this way you're sure of it meeting up. I've also ensured that the dorsal and anal fin is in the centre of the fish, along bottom and top. Otherwise, if it's out of alignment, that wouldn't be natural at all. Okay, you see here the basic sewing is done. Now I'm just going along again to pull up all the tucks that are in the fish that just want tightening up. There we go, just tied it off there and here. Now I just want to put a little bit of padding into it. We've got the fins centrally and along the top and at the bottoms here just right. But it needs a little bit of padding into the gill area here before we start setting up the fins and cleaning it off. And also I want to take out the meat in the cheeks, which I'll do next. So here, this cheek area is flesh, and we don't want to leave that meat in there. So what I'm going to do is just cut along this inside edge here, just on the bone, and pare back the skin inside there. Remove any of that flesh out in there. Get round him with a knife. I'm going to fill this later with some filler before it has time, the skin has time to dry off, so that it doesn't shrink in too much there. Right round up underneath the skin and lift all that cheek out. That's it. Just down to bone. Take some borax. Make sure there's plenty of borax in there before I put the filler in later. That's going to preserve it in there and dry it. Do the same the other side. Right, now it's just a matter of looking inside the fish and just getting these areas, the gills are there, a little more padded out. And just mould that into shape there. That's better. Now the fins aren't perfect on this fish. The back, the dorsal especially, is, I've noticed in a few fish in that river they were like that. Not perfectly formed. But we can think about setting those soon. So I'll have to cut some card for that. Right, so there's our basic fish. I've got some card here, or thin watercolour paper, which will do for the shape of the fins. So first I'm going to want a couple of pieces. So fold my paper over, so to get two at the same time. Like that to hold the tail. Now I'm only going to put the eye on one side. If we look at this eye, you can see what I've done here. You can see here that I've painted it to look as close to the original eye of the trout as possible, with the little gold ring and the black just mottling in. I like to put a little bit of silicone around my fish's eye here, just to give that last sort of fleshy texture. So I'm just going to mould that onto the fiberglass there. But when the eye goes in, it will squeeze out slightly, like, and then clean it off. But it'll make that nice fish flesh texture that I want in there. And the oval of the eye goes forward. When I fill that cheek out, that'll make more sense. Now we have to set the fins. We need some pins. Say this fin is not in very good condition, but we'll see what we can do. Just clean it off a little bit and then we'll pin that into place. Not going to gain anything by stretching that one out anymore, I don't think. So we'll put one pin just in there, right through at that stage. Stretch him out. To raise the tail just slightly like that. Put a pin there. Now we'll put this one on. And I want to hold that tail down a bit, it's splitting there, so I don't want a big split showing. I'll bring that bit up to meet it. And then we can put this one on. To help hold the whole thing together. And so we go on setting all of the other fins. You see we've almost set the fins now. trout basically set up. Now I just need to fill these cheeks in, or this cheek anyway. The other one isn't quite so important because it's behind anyway. And lift that cheek up. And then put in the filler. That hole. We've already got the borax in there, so that's going to preserve anything. Use a couple of pins just to make sure that stays, because otherwise the skin's liable to pull back. I like his fins in that sort of position, so if that's the case, I've got them both about the same. And there we are, there's our basic trout. Just clean a little of the borax off the outside, because it isn't needed much on the outside anyway. I'll just give this fish a little clean up. That'll bring back some of the colour and texture again of the scales. We get the varnish on and the paint on, and this is part of what this one was about, is that one of the youngsters wanted to ask me about painting trout. I should do a rainbow later, but at the moment we're just going to do this brownie. Make sure there's no lumps and bumps where there shouldn't be. Any other little holes we can fill later on. So a wee bit up here as well. Two small tears in my cutting, but when you're dealing with just a pen knife and a caravan, it's not that easy. And we'll leave that to dry out. Okay, the trout is drying now, and probably is dry enough even to paint after nearly a week. So in these conditions it's shrunk down onto the body former. And you see I've filled any little cuts that I did earlier. The fins have dried out well enough for me to think they'll be alright when they're varnished and shaped up. This fin wasn't very good anyway. The fins weren't in that good a condition on this fish to start with. We've done what we can. And I've also done the back as well. You can see I've filled right across the back here and pushed a loop of heavy wire right the way through and out of the fish, which will go through the backboard I've got to mount this fish onto. So I've already prepared for it being mounted onto a board later. The next job for me to do, having done this filling and sanding, I've used a little bit of PVA glue and filler on this one to make it a bit more plastic and adhere to it better, is to just give a base coat to this, to just blend it back in with the actual rather dry now and lack of colours trout body, and then I shall gradually bring the tones up properly with individual acrylic colours at the next stage for you to see. Now the modern way to do this is with airbrush techniques, but as I haven't got an airbrush and I'm an artist with a brush anyway, let's see what we can do when we haven't got those facilities. Anyway, it's going to be very dark along the back here, but I'm going to start with a sort of yellow ochre colour here, so a little bit of this yellow ochre acrylic paint and a little bit of white with that just to get started off, because I want to give a base coat to this filler just to bring it back to something like the colour of the present fish. I shall work over this in a minute. This is just to get rid of the white filler. Gradually build these colours up. At the moment I just want to say lose this white filler, just in case we can see over the top of it. And this is going to be helping to seal this filler off as well. So it's not just to colour it, it's just as much to seal off this ray absorbent filler. But already it's having quite a nice effect. It's bringing it back to look a bit more like a fish. We're going to use all sorts of techniques on this. I'm going to put on some lustre as well, which will allow the fish to have a slight purple sheen to it too when I've finished. You can see the actual colouring of the fish is showing through still. It is there, I'm not losing it completely. Just a little bit of tinting now, putting some of the yellow back into the body here. Just to give it a base coat and lose any of this filler that we've done earlier. and softly blend these colours in. Chin here where it's very, very white. So I'll lay the paint a little bit more heavily under here even now. And my yellow ochre again. Don't want to get too advanced with the painting at this stage. I'm just trying to build up. There we go, that'll do, and let that dry off. And we'll carry on working on that tomorrow. Well, this morning that's dried nicely enough, so we can start with the next coats. I'm going to turn it over to the side and just get this coated now. Only because I don't want the light reflecting, the colour reflecting on the shiny varnish wood later, so I'll make it a bit darker. Deep blue and a bit of black, just work along this back again. So I'm using a bit of Prussian blue and black this time to really give a nice depth to that back, and down into the back of the tail as well, because that's going to be a lot darker. These fins are also quite dark by the look of it. It's amazing what we can do with a brush. Airbrushes are very nice, and it would be nice to invest in that one day, but for the moment let's see what we can do with the old traditional skills that most of us have, if we put our minds to it with a bit of practice, and also keeps the cost down as well. If you paint some brushes, a lot cheaper than buying all that airbrush equipment, which is very nice, but hundreds of pounds. Now let's carry on down here and start to get the yellow ochre again. Just to coat the fish, nothing more, just to stop the reflections. To stop any glare coming back on the varnish wood behind. Not going to bother about any detail or anything else back there. Underneath the fish, of course, we wanted a purer white. There, that'll do just for that side. So while I've got the fish that way up, looking at this dark paint we've got, the deep blue and the black, to tint these fins on the other side as well. Right, we can let that dry off for the moment again, do this in stages. Okay, that's dry enough now, nothing on my fingers. Turn it over, and we're going to go back to gradually working up the colours on this now. Put my paints up again. And the first thing I'm going to do is to go back into the dark top and darken that down and get a really nice black top to it. And that deep blue and the black combined, which gives me a slightly darker, richer black to the thing. On the fins we notice that the colour becomes more transparent as it comes up towards the body, so we can just thin that down a bit, lift it out a bit, same as we can with the trout's fin. Right, now we'll just gently bring that in there. Lifting the colour out a bit so that we can put some darker spots on there later. Now there's a very slight, because it's a brown trout, there's a very slight brown tint coming into the dark up here, which I'm going to now put in. Just a little bit of brown into the black, and then back to our yellow ochre again. I'll let the yellow ochre just blend in along here. I'm going to lose all the natural spots of the fish. Just see them glowing through. And this gives us our base coat. While it's still wet, we'll just bring some of this white in here too. we're starting to get the effects of our trout now a bit more. Again, let those colours dry. Now, talking about airbrushes, of course we can use sprays with an aerosol, and I want a very slight silver spray across this. Not too much, just a little, and I'll go back then over it with the black paint just to gleam and glisten a bit. The advantage of these spray paints is they usually dry very quickly, so we can get back and yet again go back to our very darks and work those over the top again. A little bit of brown, do that again. Do want a really dark over the top here. We just scumble this over the surface. We can bring back letting the silver just shine through slightly. Now with that brown glaze, use it a little more dryly. Some of the yellow ochre, a little bit thicker. You can just tint into the fish and keep working at it until it starts to really take into the body. You can see I'm starting to bring some of the reds and browns out in the trout a bit more now. A little touch of red into my burnt sienna. Just bringing those reds into the trout just a little bit. Give this nice brown effect just across the scales. Just tickling the colours on. You can gradually build up the texture of the fish, because the scales are still there. I mean, we haven't removed, when we took the skin off, we haven't smoothed the scales out at all. It's just the texture is still there for us to use, which is exactly what I'm doing now. We're getting that nice brown trout feel to it. Now it's time to continue the layers of lights and darks. In this case, a little bit more of the dark browns. Now, I'm going to be putting some lustre on there later, but I want to add a little bit more pink and purple to the fish. So very thin glazes of these colours now. Just a little wash of pink going in over the fish. I'm going to do more of this with the purple lustre, which will actually gleam and shine across the fish as if it's a reactive colour, which it is. You know, if you're going to paint something like this, that's the way you want good photographs, because you really need to be able to find these colours in those photographs. And this is just with one flat brush at the moment, not going into anything too fancy. Don't make it too pink, it'll turn into a rainbow trout, just enough to get the base colours. There we are. Now we've almost got enough there now to start on the spots. Surprising what colour there is gleaming on these fish. It's coming back with the white again and just catching under the gill rakers here. I have to do more with the reactive colours. Now we need to go to a smaller brush, because we're going to start painting in the details now. I'm still going to use a slightly flat-ended brush, so I want fairly large spots, and we'll find the black in the fish now. Got a spot, just there. Soften these a bit and blend them in. I don't want them to look like painted marks, so bit by bit. This would be the good old-fashioned way of using a brush and painting almost scale by scale. And a distinctive brown trout appearance. And around that is a very, very light blue. Hopefully you're now getting the gist of what we're trying to do here. And gradually building these lovely colours up. Right, now it's time to start using these reactive colours. You can see here, and they're a fine pigment which you mix with a little PVA glue and water and paint very thinly, and it gives you a lovely pearlescent or opalescent effect, in this case either pink or blue. And as that trout has both of these colours there, I'm going to do just that. I'm going to link the pink through from the top here into a little bit of blue and then back to the pink again. To do that, I'm going to take a little PVA glue, which I've already got prepared, and mix that with some water, clean water in this case. Must have clean water for this job. No other colour in there, just clear water. And then a little bit of the pink, violet. It's a powder form. Wouldn't be too strong because it's quite strong stuff. A bit more water in there. And a wee touch of the PVA glue to give it transparency and to stick it on as a medium. In this case we're using the glue as an actual medium. And that should give us a lovely opalescence when it's dry. So we'll paint that all the way across everything. You can even now see a very slight pinky tint coming. Right the way across the fins, everything. Back. Because the PVA glue will dry clear anyway. We want to do the same with the blue. Lovely stuff, but don't make it too strong. Some PVA glue again, in with the water, and again we paint that right across the whole fish, right across the middle here. It will give it a lovely opalescence. That will still shine even when the varnish is on. Right, finish that off with a nice coat of water, just to make sure everything is smoothed in. The acrylic paints have already dried, so we haven't got to worry about them. And then we'll just come back with a few bits of colour after this to bring it up. We're almost there with our fish. Might let that dry off, then we'll see the effect. In the meantime, I remember this fin was a lot redder. I'll just go back onto some of these little bits of red on the fish too. Just bring them out a fraction more. You see how I can gently bring these colours subtly out, even with a brush. The airbrushes are great, but they're not the be and end all. There are other ways we can do it, especially if we don't have much money to have to invest in those sorts of things. But now it's just a matter of building up a few more of the colours and making it a bit stronger and a bit more detail here and there. A bit more cream under the belly here. Put it along and then we'll thin it out. So we'll use the acrylic as a glaze. We'll put along the colour first and then use the water to thin it in afterwards. Because it's quite a nice strong yellow along the bottom here of this fish. From its top lip into the cheek, around the gill there, into the side of the fish, and right up here into the... Now if I use water, clean water, and just thin it in, I should be able to make it a bit weaker. It's almost too strong at the moment. Bring some white over there in a moment because that's just too much. We'll wipe it away a bit. And we'll strengthen some of these colours a bit more afterwards. make it too yellow ochre-y. I guess we can afford a little more over the back as well. A wee touch of the brown in it. This way we haven't lost the lustre, but we have got some of the browner colours of the brown trout coming into it a bit more. And that's looking, I think, quite reasonable. Once we get the varnish onto that, that'll look quite nice. Just need to clean a few things up in a moment. Go back with the white. It needs to be a bit whiter underneath again. The leading edge of that fin is just a bit whiter. This one too. And that one. Just catching a little bit lighter over the top of the fin too. Just come back in some of these darker spots and just hit one or two of them again, just slightly, keep bringing them up, taking them back again and bringing them out and letting them be subtle until we get just the effect we want. Now I reckon we won't know until we get a retouching or a varnish on this whether that's really working or not. Just want to make the reds a little stronger still on that trout. So I'm going back to my bright red now. Just going to touch a little bit here and there, a bit more. Not really garish, but I just want to make sure those reds are bright as the original thing was. I'll let that dry and then we'll try one coat of varnish after I cleaned it up. To use these artist varnish, in this case a retouching one, which means I can always work in it a bit more later. Let's see if that gives me the effect we want. It'll take a few coats, but a nice gloss on that. I didn't clean the eye up yet, but just to give it one coat to soak in a bit and see how we look. That's not bad, but it'll need a few coats to get it really lovely, glossy and shiny. Right, we're now on the final stage of this trout. I'm using what we call a rigger brush now, which is a very long fine brush, because I want to do some very long fine work. We need to get in a little bit of some very, very light lines and little bits of scale onto the fish, in which case I need this very fine brush to do just that. And the idea is to just get the feeling of some of these very fine scales that are highlighted up into here. In other words, I've lost some of the texturing, it's got a bit smooth, so we now need to go back in there, just see if we can find it again. Because I've already varnished it, it's resisting a bit, which makes it just break up that bit more and give me a bit more of a feeling of the scales. Just to put in some of these very tiny bits of brilliant scale that aren't quite shining to give the effect of it. And it's these final details that can just make it, I think. The Victorians didn't have airbrushes and so on, they had to work like this. And so it's rather nice to go back to traditional skills, isn't it? And feel that you're doing what, even if it might not be as technically accomplished as some of the new airbrush techniques might be, it's rather nice to go back and be able to do it by old ways. And look at the lovely effect we're getting there now, the scales of the fish gleaming. So it built up layer after layer of paint and varnish, and now I'll be able to do just 1 or 2 coats, last coats of varnish just to bring this out. Just a little more white underneath. Just gently bringing it into the body. And I reckon that's our painting done, so we'll leave that at that. What I've got to do now is just the rest of the varnishing, and then we'll see how it looks on the background. Well, I think we've completed the fish. It needs a bit more varnish yet, and also I've made the backboard. And you see all I've done here is take a piece of marine ply and sanded and varnished, made it into a nice little shape, and also put on some picture hooks and string at the back, just to make a very, very simple wall hanging. And the idea is now, having got 2 holes drilled in the back, 2 holes here for the wires, that those pieces of wire will just press into there and hopefully just go through like that, and then all I've got to do is pull them tight and bend them up, and our fish is ready and mounted. Well, there we are then, there's a completed brown trout.